In the Midlands. Where are you?
West Sussex, so southeast.
We were there for like the first lockdown from like March till August. We're in Haywards Heath.
Okay, yeah.
And we actually would have liked to have stayed there. We would have been happy to stay there, but Dylan got a job in the Midlands, so we had to come up here. But it was beautiful down there, and where we were was amazing because we were right near some woods, and we had a massive garden with heaps of wildlife, and we knew people. That was nice.
You've managed to sort of connect with people, even though, you know, that's a bit tricky at the moment, isn't it? It's not straightforward.
It's not straightforward, but like I will meet people anywhere. In a desert, I'll meet people in a desert. So yeah, like it's fine. I've got people we've got a really small village. It's got like 4 streets, and I've managed
wow.
Yeah. And like we met someone in the playground. Like we were about, I don't know, 7 miles away from our village yesterday. We went for a walk in another park, and one of my kids made a little friend, and we're meeting them on Thursday at the playground. So yeah, like it's possible. You just have to be open to it, I find, and not afraid to actually stick your neck out a bit. Be really intentional about it. Like if you want to be friends with someone, just like be really like, yeah. And people are really like really open to it, I find. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've sort of got a pretty set social group now, but like in the beginning it was like being really intentional. When your kids make those connections, kind of going with it, like let's meet again, let's do this again. Sort of I mean, I was like that in Australia too. I've always got room for more friends. Have you not always lived there? Have you moved? Have you?
Well, we didn't move very far. So we used to live in West Sussex, and now we live in West Sussex. So, but
but a different village or a different town.
Yeah, it's a different village. So we used to live in a town, and I'm a bit of a country girl at heart, really. So I was always sort of itching to get out of the town. And yeah, circumstances changed, so we were able to do that. And yeah, we were able to get somewhere that suited us better as a family. You know, we are in a village. We've probably got more than 3 roads because they've got a new housing estate now. So that's, you know, it's all a bit.
Yeah.
But really, it's really quite small. It only opened a village shop in May. It doesn't have a school, which suited us fine. The estate agents were very concerned because I've got 4 children. They were very concerned when they kept showing us around this house. You do know there's not a school here, don't you? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. I don't need one. Thank you.
We've got a school, ironically, but no shop. But in summer, the good thing is that the school kids all go to the playground across the road when school's out. So actually, it was quite good in summer because there was always people in the playground. We didn't like make any real friendships or anything, but there would be people there just to kick about with, which was quite good. That's the benefit, I guess, of having a school, even though we don't use it. But
I mean, there were kids everywhere. I don't know what the estate agent was worried about. You know, there's a family across the road from us, and at the moment, you know, the kids play out in the road, scoot up and down and stuff together.
And you're never very far from another village, are you, in the UK? Like you wouldn't
not really.
Go more than like a couple of miles to find another. Yeah.
So we didn't really move very far, but we did move. So we're going to talk tonight about ditching the rules, and I see
let's talk about that.
No, we are I'm really excited actually, because I just think it's going to be really fun. I mean, I don't know about your journey, but I was thinking back on like where we used to be and what, you know, how we made the changes and what happened when we made changes. And I was thinking of all the things these rules that I was stuck in that I didn't even question. And I was thinking about them all, and I just thought, oh my days, how ridiculous. How ridiculous. Like, we only ever used to have pancakes on pancake day.
That's really funny because the pancake thing, that's one that I use that a lot.
Oh, do you?
And I think that's because I didn't realize that people were so extreme as to only have it once a year, but it used to be like a weekend thing. You only have it, we have it on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Whereas actually you're allowed to have them any day.
Yeah.
Even if I did go to school a few years ago, I would still make pancakes in the week.
Okay.
If we had time, I'd still make them. Not crepes. That's just crazy. No one would make crepes during the week. It takes about 4 hours. But like on the week, during the week, I'll make quick pancake. I mean, now we can because we don't go anywhere. We can.
That's interesting. So are we going to have to differentiate between crepes and pancakes?
Yeah, it's an important distinction in our family because my kids prefer crepes.
So crepes for you is
thin, very thin.
I call that a pancake.
Yeah, when I was growing up, that's what we always had. So my dad is English, and so we grew up quite English, even though we were in Australia. So all of my food references are English, and my dad always called crepes pancakes. And it wasn't until I was a bit older and other people were having these fat pancakes, which I always thought were like American, like hot cake.
Yeah, that's what we call them. Either that or American pancakes.
Yeah, we never had them at home ever. Sometimes someone would make pikelets, which are like a small pancake that doesn't really rise, but my mum and dad never made them. They were like they're like a common I don't know who they thought they were. They're not the queen. But like you'd get them at like maybe a kid's party with some, or like at I don't know, school or something, with slapped with some like horrible margarine and cheap jam on them or something. So we never had those either. But now, so if we say to the kids, oh, we're going to have pancakes, they will say crepes or thick pancakes. We'll have to let them know because they will always prefer crepes. Yeah.
Okay.
But they do take a really long time to make. My husband literally makes half a day's work out of it. Does my head in.
See, what we end up doing with pancakes is I make like a big bowl of batter for the pancakes, and then I'll do a couple for one child when they get up, and then the next child to get up. But this bowl of pancake batter will do like the whole day, like every time. So I'm hungry. Can we have another? Another pancake. And that'll do us a whole day. But that's a really interesting. Just talking about cultural differences, because I was thinking about this whole idea of ditching the rules, and of course our rules are so often culturally
we're
defined.
We're not wasting conversation fodder here, are we?
I'll probably just edit this in.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah,
okay,
I know.
cool.
I know. Yeah. I'll just edit it in. So like the whole cultural thing is our rules are so often defined by our culture. So when so when you talk about dismantling all that, or even for those of us, obviously like yourself, who have obviously lived in another country, or those of us that have maybe studied other cultures or traveled to other places, you kind of have this underlying notion that other people do things differently, and like it's okay. And maybe I could do things differently.
Yeah, it is okay, but then there is also when there's this idea of when people come into our country that they adopt our customs, and people feel very uncomfortable about other people coming and continuing to practice their culture. So like there is a lot of stuff that goes on, I think, in people's minds around the way things should be, and I do think some of that particular thing is that feeling of a threat to their cultural practices, and some of those cultural practices are wrapped up in rules, but some of them, when they have like ancient origins, are much more values driven. Yeah.
So you're sort of referring really to that the notion of like cultural appropriation. So
so in Australia, and it's probably the same here, but I haven't lived here my whole life to know, but in Australia, particularly in relation to Islam, because there's been a lot of fear about Islam, right, in Western countries, the idea, people being quite outraged about people coming into Australia and continuing to practice their culture, and this idea that as soon as someone comes into your country, that they should just adopt all of your norms and practices and somehow abandon what they already knew. And I don't know whether that is, I don't have that feeling myself, and so it's a little bit hard to relate to, but I guess it's that fear that somebody else is or that your culture is under threat or under attack. Like it's fear-based, and it's very similar to what parents think when we suggest or make comments about ditching the rules, because this is very triggering for people. People get quite head up about it. Like, how dare you? It will like really quite, you know. And I think it's similar to that feeling that people have when someone comes into their country with some different norms. That feeling that it's going to undermine everything, like the fabric of society. And I think that's how people feel about questioning rules, and probably why when children question rules as they do, it invokes such a response in people.
Yeah, see, interestingly, because I was thinking of it the other way around, cultural appropriation as in, if I travel to another country and then I start to adopt the culture of the culture that I'm in, the country that I'm in. But that being inappropriate because it's not my culture, it's their culture. So like almost the opposite of what you were saying, actually, you know. So when people start to wear clothes that belong to that particular community, and it's seen as like disrespectful because that's not your culture, and that's why it's called cultural appropriation. You're appropriating someone else's culture onto you. So it's almost like the opposite of what you were saying, actually. Which is interesting.
It's opposite but related, actually, I think, because the appropriation stuff is an issue when it's particularly an issue when based on a dynamic between different cultures. So one culture that has perhaps been like undermined, or a culture where there's colonization's taken place, or there's been a threat to that culture over time, and so rightly that cultural group really fiercely want to protect their cultural practices and traditions because that's how they maintain their culture and their connection to wherever they're from. And most often it is white Westerners wanting to take parts of that culture that appeal to them on some level without invitation. I mean, to me, that's where appropriation happens. It's where it's without invitation. Like if you're invited into a culture to share somebody else's practice open-heartedly, I think that's different to when you take it without invitation. And interestingly, the same groups who are more guilty of appropriation are also the ones that want to staunchly protect their own culture. So it's all fear-based, I guess, isn't it?
I love how these things are all linked, really, because
they are all linked. Yeah.
What we're talking about really is one culture oppressing another culture.
Yeah.
And then what we're talking about with our children, when we're talking about rules, is about us imposing rules on our children. And in doing so, we are controlling our children. We're trying to control their behavior. We're trying to control even what they're thinking. We're trying to control their morals, and in that way, not giving them the freedoms, we are oppressing our children. That's a very big thought for some people, that
they would be guilty of childism. Because I think, all parents want to do a good job. All parents really love their children. All parents want what's best. And so the suggestion that what they're doing might not be in the best interest of the child that's quite a hard thing to get your head around. And, lots of people, I guess, take it personally because they might feel that someone is saying that they're not doing a good job as a parent, because there's maybe a different way to think about it. So I understand why people have strong reactions to it, for sure.
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt because I wanted to tell you that there is also an episode of Unschooling Conversations where I speak to Adele Jarrett-Kerr, and we talk about anti-racism work in unschooling families. So unschooling as a powerful tool for decolonisation work and decolonising our own parenting, trusting our children and nurturing our relationships. And you can find that in the back episodes on Anchor and also on YouTube. So that's episode number 6, where we have a conversation with Adele Jarrett Kerr on all things to do with anti-racism and decolonising work in unschooling. And now back to Ditching the Rules with me and Sarah.
Welcome to Unschooling Conversations. Today I'm joined by Sarah Beale from Partnership Parenting. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah, the Partnership Parenting movement.
Lovely. In this episode, we are going to discuss the radical notion of ditching the rules. I'm Heidi Steel, former teacher and unschooling parent to 4 school-aged children who are happy living and learning as they go. I've been unschooling for almost 10 years and blog regularly and organise coaching and mentoring services on unschooling, which you can find more about at LIVEPLAYLEARN.org. I'm also inviting people to get involved with the podcast, ask us questions, which you can do in various ways on the different platforms that the podcast is on, so by audio or commenting. And then we can hopefully address those in future episodes. So hi, Sarah, welcome to the podcast today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. So I'm also a mum to 4 school-aged children. And we have been unschooling not for as long as you. My kids might be a bit younger, maybe about 3 years. And in Australia, actually, my youngest would have only just started school this year, I think. We've been out of Australia for about 1.5 years. And that was just a natural evolution of our unschooling life, really. I am a parent coach and mentor, and I work with parents who want to live outside of the school system and also parents who want to be in partnership with their kids, particularly. And what else do? I do blog as well. And I've just written in 2 books. My introduction's getting long, isn't it? One of them is called Intuitive, Knowing Her Truth. And the other one's called Dreamers and Changemakers. And both of them are very much about where my kids have taken me. So it's kind of been like a journey of spiritual healing, I think, living a life of no rules with 4 kids. Takes you places you never imagined you'd go, right, Heidi?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Not physical places, although obviously you and I have.
Well, I mean, you moved to a different village.
You know, we have physically moved, but yeah, growth journeys. So we're really here to talk about this radical notion of ditching the rules in our parenting. And I call it radical because mainstream parenting is sort of is adamant, really, that constructing rules about how children should be and how they should live and how they should behave, and then parents being consistent with these rules is actually paramount to sort of parenting success. This is what makes you a good parent. So this notion that we live a life without clinging to these rules is rather radical and can really trigger people and be a little bit frightening. And as you just mentioned, really it's our children that have shown us the way, have really helped us to maybe change our own ideas about what we thought parenting would be and how we would be as parents. So is there any point in your parenting journey when you realised that enforcing the rules as a parent was not the route that you were going to continue on?
I think it might have been when they were born. And none of them were rule followers. So I'm lucky in that, actually. I've really had no choice, actually. So I've almost cheated because there was really no other way for me to be able to get on with my children, because they are not children who follow rules or don't question stuff or do what someone else thinks that they should do, and they never have been. I'm not quite sure how that's happened. There's that question always of like, Is it because of me, or am I the way I am because of them? Who knows? I knew before my first child was born, and my husband and I had spoken about this actually, we knew nothing about being a parent really, only what we'd seen other people do. But I remember as a child being told no to stuff, asking why, being told because I said so, or, you know, and similar, and always knowing before even having children that I was never going to do that, that I was always going to be open to conversation, because that really stung as a child, feeling like I didn't have a voice and I didn't have an option, and that my opinion wasn't worth listening to, that somebody else ultimately had this power over me. It's a powerless feeling as a child. It really reinforces that you've got nothing, actually. You're completely at the whim of another person. And I often couldn't, and I say this with no disrespect to my parents, because, you know, they did the best that they could, as well as we all do. But being at the whim of another human being is quite scary, I think. And I remember that feeling, and I didn't want to do that to another person. So I mean, of course, you always go deeper, don't you? And no matter how old your children are, you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And every week there's something else that you let go of still. But we were never big on rules. But I think it took me a long time to be okay with that myself. Like, it was hard work. And I was definitely in conflict with my kids a lot, and with myself, actually, more than anyone, about at what point do we need a rule? At what point should I step in? At what point should I say, don't draw on the wall? At what point should I say, okay, we've had enough Nutella now? Like, you know, and there's no right or wrong answer, but like, and it depends on what's going on in the family and the age of the child as to where they push those things. Because, you know, a 1-year-old, well, I mean, the worst thing they do is maybe just drop their bowl of food on the floor when they finished or whatever. And, you know, there's no like willful kind of disobedience, or they're not doing that to annoy you, or, you know, and they were always pretty easy for me to kind of work through. But it's when they really start questioning you and asking you to explain yourself, and you know, all the whys. Why does it have to be like that? Like, why do we have to eat vegetables? Why do I have to brush my teeth? Like, it's all of that stuff that I guess really seriously led us down this road of feeling like we actually needed to have some intention behind it.
Yeah, so that kind of idea of if I'm not doing this, what am I doing? Yeah. You know, if we've come to a position, which is usually because our children have led us there, you know, so similar to you, it was my children that, you know, I chose to listen to them. I chose to listen to them when they said no to me, or, you know, even when they were really, really tiny, that idea of putting babies into sort of a, you know, strict routine, you know, but my child wasn't happy with it. They wanted to cuddle, or they wanted to feed at times when it wasn't in the schedule. So just being responsive to our children. And then
it really, for me, and who's kind of on this same sort of journey, it started with like attachment parenting, and this was like that makes sense, and that's easy because you're like, right, well, we have to breastfeed and sleep together and cuddle them all. Like, you know, there are some, like, you know, it can be a bit dogmatic as well. But then when you've progressed past that basic stuff, just like keeping them alive and nourishing them in that very instinctive way, then they start pushing. And then that's when a lot of people get quite lost, because it's like, oh, now my toddler that I could always sort of pacify or comfort with a feed or a cuddle, now they're actually being like willful, or they're pushing limits, or they're...
When children begin to question stuff, to when even with their actions, they get a bit more active, and it's changing our mindset so that we start to realize that our children aren't being willfully sort of disobedient to some, you know, to rules or standards that we have in our house or as parents, but that they are frequently just behaving in developmentally appropriate ways. And for us to respond to that, maybe without the sort of punishment element, but to accept that this is a normal part of child development. So you gave the example of children drawing on the walls. I mean, my eldest two, when they were at that sort of typical age where that happens, that wasn't their thing. They weren't interested in particularly drawing. I don't think it wasn't their thing. But when I had my third, she drew everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It was it was insatiable, her appetite for drawing. And fortunately we owned our house, and we ended up actually drawing picture frames around her drawings on the wall. And we tried to embrace
my
it.
third child as well, actually. It's funny, isn't it?
We tried to embrace it a little bit. We tried to redirect her, with different paper, and we even used to masking tape wallpaper lining up on the wall for her to draw on. Anyway, in the end it got so prolific that I ended up drawing photo frames, or frames, even picture frames, around her artwork on the wall, because not only did I want to move away from the constant sort of energy of redirecting, because it really wasn't working, or the battle, but I also wanted to I wanted to stop having conversations with people who came in our house and were like, ooh, someone's been drawing on the walls. And because I had put frames around it, it suddenly became like, oh, look at that, someone's drawn a nice picture, instead of pointing out, this
funny, isn't it?
behaviour. Yeah.
So, isn't that funny? Yeah. It was my third who was the drawer as well, actually. And he, like you say, he just didn't really, I guess they're just motivated by self and by what they want to do, and as they should be. We just gave our kids a wall, actually. So we did manage to mostly redirect. Like we gave them literally the whole hallway, which was a really big wall. And it was really only one kid that was bothered. We just gave them that wall. And actually that did work for us. But I think the interesting thing, and the thing that's that takes some time to lean into, is that none of this stuff's really about the kid and the drawing on the wall, but it's about how what the work that we do to get okay with it, however that is. I think that's the interesting thing, and that's what you worked through that. You went through whatever process you use to question where your beliefs were coming from about a child who should or shouldn't do something, and how you wanted to engage with that child, and realizing that butting up against them wasn't the answer. And that's the bit that parents find really hard, because the assumption then is that we are letting our kids walk all over us and they're doing what the hell they like. I mean, that's cool, that's what they think, it doesn't really bother me, but there's actually a lot of work that goes on in the background in unpacking our programming and unlearning what we think we know about what is right and not right, and then how we can relate with our children around that stuff. So you turned something that could have been the source of some conflict, and a situation where many parents would have chosen a consequence or punishment to try to combat it, which doesn't always stop it, and then the conflict continues, and you decided to turn it into a source of joy. And probably you still laugh about it and find a lot of love in that story.
Yeah, and the other thing is, part of this deconstructing our beliefs is really beginning to recognise, that mostly the problem is ours, that mostly the thing that we are battling against is not actually our child, it's our self and our own beliefs and our own notions about what parenting should look like, or what our children should be doing. And deconstructing that so that we can hopefully work towards having a better relationship with our children. Because the thing I think that motivates me the most is that not being in conflict with my child, is finding ways that we can, build our relationship together. And if that means that I have to let go of some of the ideas about what I think my child should be doing or how they should be behaving, then I am willing to put that work in to the process so that we can work towards better relationships with our children. So I think I want to ask you about that aspect a little bit, because your website is partnership parenting. I keep asking you if that's right. Is that right? I don't want to give people.
It is, because it is. I got it wrong for about a month when we first set up our website. I kept calling it the wrong thing. So
what? So
sure that's right.
What is when people say, because we use in Unschooling, which is obviously how we choose to educate our children, the philosophy that we use this term partnership a lot. What does it mean?
So, I mean, it means collaboration, co-creation. It means everyone's equal. Everyone's got a part to play that is very different to that conventional model of parenting where the parent is at the top and the kids are underneath and the parent says what happens and the kids do it. So it's not that. It's like we're all just in a circle, a messy, chaotic circle. And it's really built on really strong values. It's built on consent. It's built on autonomy. It's built on connection and communication. And those things are at the forefront, and freedom, really. Everyone gets to be free. And through that, they learn, and we all learn how to relate with other people. And it's a very different way of seeing kids, because we would see that children are born whole and exactly as they're meant to be, and we don't need to pour our knowledge into them for them to be able to do stuff or know stuff or contribute to the world. They, of course, learn things, by the time they're one, they're learning to walk and they're learning to eat different foods, and they know it's built in, right? Like they're born with capacity inside them. And it's really just taking that notion further, that we don't need to tell our kids how to be. They know how to be. And to be in relationship with our kids is just the greatest joy, because no one's trying to assert their authority over anybody else, or questioning anybody else's ability or wisdom or knowledge or right to have an opinion. And so really that's what partnering with my kids means. And I think a lot of people probably think it looks like a little bit of a free-for-all. And, when they were younger, it was certainly, chaotic, because, as you say, there was drawing on walls, there was kids walking into the kitchen and tipping buckets of water on the floor. And there was I used to take lots of photos of funny things, actually. There was this one time that it was probably the youngest, who's Peggy, she's my youngest, she's 6. I think she tipped a tub of popcorn onto the floor. So the kids just sat down and ate it off the floor. And I imagine another parent might have dealt with that quite differently. And really partnering with our kids just means nothing's a big deal. It's all cool.
I love the example you've given of tipping a bucket of water on the floor, because just today my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old decided that they were going to play with their dolls, really little ones actually, and they were going to take them, I don't know if they were having a bath or a swimming pool or what, but they got a big tub and filled it with got jugs of water from the kitchen, and they were filling it up, And I was in the garden. We've just got a puppy, actually, so I was in the garden with the puppy. By the time I came back in, they'd clearly overfilled this tub. It was all over the table. It was dripping everywhere. And it's just one of those moments where, as a parent, you could completely freak out, you know. Yeah. And maybe at some point in my past I would have done, but now I approach things like that completely differently, and it was about saying, okay, well, let's just mop up some of this, and then let's rethink what we're doing so that we can play with water, but without it like literally getting everywhere. And we got loads of towels out, and we moved the bucket on the floor and put it on top of the towels, and they played for ages this game that they were playing. So it's interesting that you use that one, although maybe there's a theme in our day, because they were outside today on a trampoline, and they went and put their swimming costumes on and got the hose pipe out, and were jumping on the trampoline with the hose pipe, which probably needs a little bit of context, because we're recording this in January and it was 3 degrees outside. And like you say, I can imagine other parents would be really challenged by their children wanting to play that game, maybe to the point where they actually wouldn't allow their children to play that game because it was really, really cold. But again, we just navigate things like that differently now. I put towels on the radiators, and when they came in saying, I'm cold, and they were done, even though they'd had a brilliant time, I wrapped them up in towels that had been on the radiators, and they were like, oh, that's nice. Yeah. And and we just, we now navigate those things completely differently to how maybe I would have done in the past, or how other parents would maybe view them.
It's just like mostly it's just taking no off the table, really. Like, I find that's saying yes to as much stuff as you can, and mostly you can. I think you can actually say yes to far more than you might imagine, and some of the rules that are woven really tightly into our lives are partly things that have always been there, so those shoulds, and partly I think it protects the role of parent. Like, we all know what it means to be a parent doing a particular thing. It makes sense. We know how to do it. We, particularly mums, I think, really define ourselves by the kind of mother that we are. And the idea of not having rules, actually, it can be scary, but it's also a beautiful opportunity to reinvent what being a mother or being a parent actually means. Like, you can say yes to stuff. Your kids can do like fun, crazy things, and we're going to be there to support them through it and enjoy that with them, because there's so much joy. Like, there's so much fun to be had when we just stop worrying about those shoulds and how things must be, and the possibilities that open up to us when we just say yes to as much as we can.
So I feel like we need to acknowledge that there are some rules that are out there in the world to protect us, that there are maybe some limitations on our lives that impact those choices that we make. So, for example, helping our children to be safe, guiding them through emotional outbursts that potentially are violent towards themselves or others, navigating real life sort of limits of maybe finances, geographic possibilities, practicalities of time, so those sort of things really. But there are some rules which do present themselves in our lives, but they are not arbitrary rules. They are, they are there, like I say, as sort of we are able to explain why they're there, not just because we said so. There is a solid, grounded reason. So we're not like this community of lawbreakers, for example. But how do your children navigate those real life limitations when they are unaccustomed, or no, when they are accustomed to the freedom of being able to express themselves how they want and not live under, you know, a million rules. How do they react and navigate when they've got that one rule?
Yeah,
you know?
That's a good question, because actually one of the things that comes up quite a lot when I talk about living with no rules is, well, how are they going to know? How are they going to be able to like have a job? How are they going to be able to know how to get by in a society where there are rules if they're not used to rules? But actually, I would say that children who grow up in freedom and a really high degree of autonomy and in values as opposed to rules can navigate that stuff very well. And without wanting to compare, I would hazard a guess often better than children who are highly controlled. What I've noticed about children who have a lot of rules at home and who are highly controlled at home is that they often don't know how to function without rules.
Mm-hmm.
That they don't need them to know what the right thing to do is. Now, the right thing to do is going to be different for everybody, and they're really well able to think those things through. They're really well able to manage their own autonomy and to understand how their life impacts on the life of another person outside of our family and in our family. And those things are ongoing because they're still quite young. But it's not ever been an issue for us. I actually can't think of a time where I've had an issue with one of my kids doing something that was outside of any actual rule or law. I mean, certainly they do things which other people might think are not normal. So there was a long stage of one of my children, or two of my children actually, not wearing shoes. They didn't like wearing shoes. Now, there's no law or rule about wearing shoes anywhere that we've ever been, but some people think that's weird and challenge it. We did go into a shop in another country and got told that my child had to have shoes on to go into the shop. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a law, but it was a preference. And we were like, oh, okay, no worries. And we just took that child out of the shop. And it really wasn't a big deal. And I'm just trying to think of what else they might do. Like, they question things. They say no to people. If they don't like something that somebody's doing, they'll tell them. They're not rules or laws, but they're certainly norms that are pushed. So, you know, we've got these ideas in our society that children can't question grown-ups. Certainly not grown-ups out of our family. My children will potentially question grown-ups if they don't agree with them or they think there's a reason to. They're not worried about expressing their opinion. So they're not rules or laws, but they're certainly things that grown-ups try to enforce. Even outside of the context of our family. But the distinction, I think, is that when kids have been raised really from birth to own themselves and to know themselves, they actually have that level of self-mastery quite early on. So navigating obstacles, doing things that might be perceived to be risky or dangerous, often not, because they've got this inbuilt like risk assessment mechanism, and all kids have it, but kids who aren't allowed to test it, I would say, don't have a finely developed one, whereas children who are allowed to test it really early on do have it. And I think that same thing applies to rules. What I would say is that many of the rules and laws that we have in our societies are arbitrary and not always there for a good reason, and I absolutely welcome my children questioning them. And we do, like, we have heaps of conversations about why certain things are. Some of them don't make sense. And so we do talk about that, you know, like driving on the motorway at 70 miles an hour, that's the speed limit. That makes sense. We can all understand why that's a law, although it's not in all other countries, which is interesting. So there's another kind of cultural thing as well. And like in Germany, they've got an open speed limit and people hammer down the motorways and have very few accidents. So, I mean, even those things that we will argue as a society, we need these rules to protect us. There are other places in the world that don't necessarily have them, and they cope very well without them. So, I always think there's room for questioning more, for sure. As there is in the house, like we always joke. I can't think of any rules that we've got at the moment, but every now and again, someone will like do something weird. We kind of will jokingly say, "Oh, should we have that as a rule?" that we don't do that. but I can't think of anything right now. But even those things, like one of my kids jumps on the bed all the time, does my head in. And we don't have any bed frames. Our mattresses are on the floor, but it's actually when I'm on the bed and I'm doing something and she jumps on it really irritates me. So I have said, can it just be like a rule that you don't jump on my bed? But even that gets pushed out. And it's not very important. And so there's still another opportunity for me to go, well, does that need to be a rule? Is it actually okay if she jumps on the bed? So now it's just like, if I'm in the bed, can you please not jump on it? Because I might be trying to do some work, or I might find it just physically really irritating. So that's kind of where we've come to. So even it doesn't matter how relaxed we are, we always find that there's like more things that can be questioned. And it's just that openness to question it. I think that is really at the heart of it, that this openness with our children, that we're happy to take on these conversations and that we're open to considering and negotiating absolutely everything. And that there's actually nothing in our family that's like hard and fast. Like I can't think of anything at all.
Yeah, so that really comes back to the idea you were talking about earlier, which is that we are partners with our children, and that means that they have a voice and that they are able to question things, they're able to express their opinion on things, and we respect that opinion and we respect that voice. And so when we say, oh, this is a rule in our house, the rule doesn't really supersede the fact that somebody else can then come and question it at another time. It doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule forever. That's it. Someone else can come and say at another point, actually that doesn't work anymore, that doesn't work for me in this situation. And there's always that ongoing flexibility, that ongoing conversation around things. And I was thinking a little bit that when you said about rules in terms of in our families and in our society, they're not necessarily laws, they're just, that's the way, they're norms, norms in our families, or maybe our wider family I'm thinking of really, or norms in our communities and society. And for us to be able to explain, like when we go to grandma's house, okay, grandma's not going to, I hope my mum's not listening to this, grandma is not going to appreciate it if you do roly-polies on her sofa. So when we're at grandma's house, if she asks you not to do that, we can go and find you somewhere else to do that, or maybe just for this weekend, that's not a thing. Or grandma really is going to expect that you come and sit at the table when you eat your dinner, and she would probably like you to be wearing clothes. But the thing is, even though that might not be how they do things at home, they're able to take it on board and say, okay, grandma's expectations are different, grandma's life is different. I want to be able to go and see grandma, and they're able to rationalize those things and say, okay, well, I'm willing to do that because I want to go see grandma for the weekend, so that's okay, I can do that. And then knowing when they get home that they can roly-poly on the sofa to their heart's content, or watch a movie upside down, which again is not something my parents understand. So
does the child go upside down or the screen go upside down?
The child yeah, definitely. Yeah, but that idea that just because at home they have slightly more free reign, that when they step outside of that and into a community where there are different expectations, that they are able to question it. Like you say, they're able to question it, and that's important. But they're also able to say, okay, that's not impinging on my human rights. That's not, I am able to do that because I can see the bigger picture is that I belong to this community and I want to be in that place, for example.
Yeah, I think that, at the end of the day, children want to fit into their community because we are like tribal creatures. or like pack animals like that, and that's how we've survived. And our children are, far closer arguably to their instinct than we are actually. And so it makes sense that they want to fit in, and that they will behave in ways where they're going to be accepted and loved, because that's actually what they need to survive.
Were there any other thoughts you wanted to share with us? Because I'm conscious that we've had our hour, really. Are there any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
I could talk about this.
I know.
Days, but I guess what I really want parents to know, because this does seem quite crazy to lots of people, for sure, but notwithstanding the benefits to our children, because they get to grow up as amazing people that contribute to the world, and they get to share all of their amazing gifts with confidence and no fear. That's how they're going to be. It's how they are now. Like, what we get as parents is the same. So questioning the rules for our children, allows us to question the rules for ourselves. It allows us to be who we want to be. It allows us to share our gifts with the world confidently and in freedom and without fear and without judgment of ourselves. And so it's a dual kind of gift, really. Like, it's as much about us as it is about our children.
Yeah, so that whole process again of how our children lead us into this, parenting paradigm, and then but how much that impacts us as individuals, the adults in the household, and how we then sort of start to question things more and more, and how we change, and how we then move out and sort of show up in our communities and in the world, and having a positive impact on that, ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. You're right. I think we could talk about this lots more, and I would like to actually and maybe another point do like a follow-up episode. That would be great. So thank you for joining me today.
we could talk about deschooling or something.
Ooh,
yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
I think I get a feeling there's probably lots of things we could talk about. So maybe if people put questions in, we could use that to sort of decide like where we go next and what we chat about next. That would be cool.
Good. Yeah.
And people can join me again next month for the next episode of Unschooling Conversations, which are launched on the 16th of every month. Thank you for joining me today. I think I said that.
Thanks, Heidi.
And we'll do this again soon, Sarah.
Hope so. It was fun. Thank you so much.
Bye.